Here's the truth about what Miami just did in the transfer portal that most people seem to be ignoring.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and also co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we will talk about which players could be sleepers on Miami's defense. I do want to go through a really impressive, really long list of official visitors who are coming to Miami this weekend and which players Miami really needs to impress the most. Who are the guys Miami's got to make that impression on this week, who they may be right on the edge of getting or maybe committed to another school. Miami's got to sway that. We'll talk about that. But guys, as I look this morning at ESPN's talent acquisition rankings, if they combine what teams just did in class of 2024 recruiting, where Miami had a top 5 class, and what teams just did in class of 2024 transfer portal, if you combine both of those together, recruiting plus portal, Miami Hurricanes, according to ESPN, have the 4th overall class in America when you combine portal with recruiting. So anyone out there who says that, Mario Cristobal, he's abandoning high school recruiting in favor of the transfer portal, the goal is to keep doing both at a really, really high level. Now, I will talk about why I do think that the portal is going to diminish a little bit for Miami in the coming years as their young talent comes of age. But I wanted to start with this on today's episode because I got a really good, as he noted here, this isn't really a question but a concern from our everydayer Pat Mack, who says, we've loaded up our team this year with a lot of one-year-and-done players, kind of like FS Pooh did last year, he said. The reason is that our young players don't have the experience that our portal players bring to the table. It's a valid point, he says, but we need to get our youngsters a lot of playing time so that we don't have to add 15-plus players again next year. He says if we don't play them, talking about the young guys, they'll never get experience. Guys, here's the truth. Here's the reality. Let me look at the flip side of what Pat Mack just said. And his narrative is a common one, right? You bring in too many transfers, your young guys are never going to play, and you get yourself locked up in this cycle where you're taking 15, 20 transfers every single year, and you're not developing everybody. That's a common narrative out there. But on the flip side, folks, if Miami didn't take these experienced transfers, you'd probably be a 7 or 8 win team when you play mostly your young guys, right? As opposed to 9, 10, maybe 11 wins, which does feel attainable now. That's not my only reason, though, guys. I'm only getting started here. So Mario Cristobal, he's brought in some great players through recruiting, but most of the players that he's brought in, you talk about class of 2023 and class of 2024, are freshmen, sophomores, a lot of players coming in for their first year. So now you add players like Cam Ward, Damien Martinez, Simeon Barrows, Sam Brown, Mish Powell, bringing in these players. It had to be done, folks. It had to be done if you want to contend this season. And why wouldn't you want to contend this year when you have an opportunity to upgrade your roster like Miami just did? Now, here's the other part of what Pat Mack was saying about not developing your young players because they maybe wouldn't get as much playing time as they would if you hadn't brought in so many transfers. Guys, I can spin that in the other direction. And people don't talk about this enough. People hardly talk about this at all. Getting on the field, starting games, playing, 40 snaps a game, that's not the only way for young players to develop. Young players like Mark Fletcher at running back, Emory Williams and Judd Anderson at quarterback, they can learn a lot from having Damien Martinez and Cam Ward playing in front of them for a year and leading by example. Ahmad Moten and Josh Horton can learn a lot from Simeon Barrow and CJ Clark. One of the problems that Miami's had in recent years, folks, when it comes to development of talent, it's not just the fact that, maybe coaches aren't doing a good enough job teaching these players, maybe they're not playing enough. I think a big problem, this is not the only problem, but one of the problems Miami's had in recent years is this cycle of young players not having strong upperclassmen with good habits to learn from. That creates a cycle where bad habits get perpetuated if the freshmen don't have hardworking role models to lead them by example. And guys, the reason why I've been thinking about this a lot for the past 4 or 5 days is when I watched that interview that Mark Fletcher did with the Momentum podcast late last week, and when I had a chance to speak to young Miami players like CC Maui Noah just last week, Malik Bryant a few weeks ago, I'm reminded about this aspect that people don't talk about. Fletcher said it last week. When he found out Damien Martinez was going to visit Miami, he texted him and said, I need you here. Said, I'm young in this game. I want to soak up everything I can from Damien Martinez. Stories like that are the reasons why I think it's okay for Miami to be taking on transfers right now. But, of course, when these strong players we talk about, Fletcher was a class of 2023 guy, for example, when these 2023 and 2024 players, when they get to be juniors and seniors, that's when I feel Miami should not rely as much on the transfer portal, hoping you have better habits and better consistency from these players when they come of age. Because, guys, when you talk about taking on transfer players, oh my gosh, Miami took on whatever it was, I think 15 transfers is what they ended up taking on. You know, Florida State took on 17 transfers this year, and then Florida State with a transfer-led team went, 13-1. They won the ACC last year. People assume that every transfer is a mercenary or a culture killer. Not if you find the right players. Now, I'm not saying Miami has a perfect track record doing that. Obviously, they've missed on some transfers over the years. But, if you assume that every transfer is a culture killer, well, was Kiko Maui Noah, was he a culture killer? Matt Lee, Javion Cohen, were they culture killers? No, they made the culture here better. Now, it's still early with Cam Ward, who hasn't played a game at Miami yet, but I covered this guy all spring, had a chance to speak with him a couple times. All signs point to Cam Ward being a godsend and a leader by example, certainly not a culture killer. Plus, to add to what you're saying, in addition from, I feel like Miami's young players can learn as long as you're getting the right guys. Again, as long as you're getting the right guys, they can learn from the upperclassmen. Also, in addition to what I say about getting on the field, playing, 30, 40, 50 snaps in games on Saturdays, that's not the only way to develop as a player. I do think several of Miami's young players can get on the field in rotational roles and gain some experience this year, even if they're not starting, right? I think Zaquan Patterson, 5-star safety who just came in out of Chaminade, I think he can get opportunities to play in a thinner safety room, even though he probably won't start. Miami's wide receiver room is not thin, but I still think a guy like Josiah Trader is going to get on the field and get chances. I mean, Ray Joseph, as a true freshman last year, he got some opportunities. He got on the field. I think JoJo Trader is absolutely going to do that this year. And Shannon Dawson likes to rotate receivers a lot. Raul Popo Aguirre, he's not going to be a starter at linebacker, but I think he's going to get on the field and get some chances. Miami, heavily used 4 to 5 linebackers last year. I think Popo's going to get playing time this year. I know you're not going to be able to keep Elijah Lofton off the field. He's going to get in. The key is you're going to be able to use some of these freshmen and second-year guys. Malik Bryant is another one I think is going to get chances off the edge. You're going to be able to use guys like this in roles where they're not necessarily starting and playing 60 snaps or whatever would be a really high snap count these days. But these guys are able to get on the field on a rotational basis, learn, and the real foundation of your team, the real spine of your team, for the most part, there are exceptions. Ruben Bain, CC Maui Noah, those are second-year guys who are part of the foundation of the team. But primarily, the foundation of the team is going to be guys like Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, who's not a transfer, of course, Damien Martinez, Kiko Maui Noah, experienced guys heading into their 3rd, 4th, 5th years in some cases. That's going to be the real spine of your team, and that's how you win. And guess what, folks? These underclassmen are going to be able to learn from players like that. So I would love to hear your thoughts because, again, people always spin, oh, you bring in a lot of transfers. Guess what? You're bringing in mercenaries. You're bringing in culture killers. Your freshmen are never going to get on the field. How are they going to develop? Well, I've seen folks way too many over the years. I mean, covering Miami for longer than I can remember. Sometimes over the years, you've had upperclassmen who don't set the right examples because those were not set for them as freshmen, and it perpetuates it. Nobody knows how to work hard. Mario Cristobal is obviously trying to set a culture here in Miami where everyone works hard and everyone grinds. You want to make practices harder than the games. That's the way it used to be. That's the way it was. When Miami was winning national titles, your biggest opponent were the players wearing your uniform Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays, relatively speaking, were easy. They're trying to get back to that. Now, again, if you're going to get back to those days, it's not only about portal, it's not only about the current culture, it's about setting that culture with players of the future. And I can't tell you how exciting the month of June is going to be on this show because we love covering recruiting. We love gathering intel and feedback from these official visits. And the month of June starts on May 31st because May 31st is when Miami's first round of official visits are going to come in to kick off that month of June. I'll tell you the players that Miami really needs to hit it out of the park with this weekend. You know, players that may be leaning in other directions, that Miami has a huge opportunity to change that narrative and change that sentiment. You know what you want to do? We're only getting started. By the way, we're live. Smash that like button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Keep it locked. FanDuel taking us down that stretch run in the NHL, Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA, Eastern, Western Conference Finals. NBA Finals is going to be here before you know it. And folks, it is win or go home time, winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers at FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Florida Panthers in Game 5 coming up. They even up the series in Game 5. The Panthers are 1.5 goal favorites on the road in New York. I'm looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves are 4.5-point favorites at home against Dallas for Game 5 there. They extended the series and avoided the sweep. So if you want to take advantage of these numbers, you check it out at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Miami's got about 16 official visitors coming this weekend to kick off that OV month. Here are players that I think Miami needs to make a big impression on this weekend. And I will start with American Heritage running back Byron Louis, who's making his OV this weekend. 6 foot tall, 205-pound, 4-star player. I think Lewis, if you can get him, and now running back is a tricky one because Miami has some options. They also really like Shekai Mills-Knight, who's coming in this weekend, and I believe Miami is probably closer to sealing the deal with Mills-Knight than they are with Byron Louis. And Miami, of course, has Gerard Pringle, who we like, verbally committed already. But the reason why I put Byron Louis at the top of this list is I do think with his size and power, he'd be a perfect complement to Gerard Pringle. Plus, the fact that Lewis plays at American Heritage. Think about what an important high school that is for Miami to recruit. This would give Miami the opportunity to tap into an important local pipeline. And Heritage, of course, is where you got Mark Fletcher from a couple years ago, right? And so, I'm going to put a sense of urgency on this one for this weekend because there is a sentiment, and the Florida State trolls who are in our comments every day will love this. There is a feeling out there that Florida State has probably moved ahead of Miami here for Byron Louis. That's where most of the recent predictions have gone. Florida State are currently the trending favorites on the On3 prediction machine, with Miami sitting second in those trends. Now, for what it's worth, you guys know one of our show favorites, Brian Smith, who covers recruiting like no other. He and Larry Bluestein are my gurus at that. Brian knows Byron Louis pretty well, talks to him often, and the last time we spoke with Smith, and Brian's going to join us again on tomorrow's show, by the way, but he told us last week, like, he doesn't get a great sense from talking with Byron that he's really leaning one way or the other, right? So if anyone right now is predicting he's definitely going to Florida State or he's definitely going to Miami, it doesn't really seem like, at least from what I gather from Smith, who talks to him frequently, that we have a great idea what Louis is thinking. But I think about why his recruitment is so important. Again, American heritage, such an important local pipeline to Miami, and the fact that your top competitor here is likely Florida State. It's always nice when you get an opportunity to win a recruiting battle against Florida State or to win a recruiting battle against the Gators. Anytime you have the opportunity to do that, I think it adds extra importance. So, if it's true that Louis has been leaning in a different direction, Miami's got a great chance to get him leaning more in your direction with this OV. I think Miami needs to hit a home run this weekend with the Enterprise High School trio. That's 4-star edge rusher Zion Grady, Jason Taylor loves, 4-star linebacker Eric Winters, who Derek Nicholson loves, and ascending 3-star cornerback Andrew Purcell. All three of these players have plenty of interest, of course, from the in-state schools, Alabama and Auburn. Enterprise High School is a powerhouse program in Alabama. And, Alabama has suddenly become an important recruiting state for Miami. And maybe if you can lock down one of these players, you can get two or maybe all three of them in a package deal. So this is a really big opportunity. And I know Jason Taylor has made visits out there to Enterprise to see Zion Grady. I think that may be one of the spots where Mario Cristobal has landed his helicopter before. So, I would view that, especially since you got three guys, one high school coming in. That's a big opportunity. Got to hit a home run there. Another one that I put on my list is 4-star cornerback Jaboree Antoine. Now, this one's interesting because he's committed to LSU, and he's a Louisiana kid. He's committed to LSU, but he's kept his recruitment somewhat open. He's visiting Miami this weekend. And Miami, of course, over the last couple of years, they've done a nice job flipping players that are committed to other prominent places. This player, Antoine, he's from New Iberia, Louisiana, which is right in LSU country, of course. But as you know, Miami recruits that part of the country very strongly because you've got your Cajun defensive coordinator, Lance Guidry, and your Cajun offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson, and which also means the scouting Miami does in Louisiana is pretty impeccable because those coaches have so many high school connections there. So, I think if there's anybody who might be able to get Antoine off of his LSU pledge, Miami might be the team to do that. Another Louisiana guy who's visiting, another cornerback, 3-star corner, Aiden Anding, is also visiting. As I learn more about this player, and listen, I don't know if he's going to end up at Miami, but this seems like one of those guys who's a 3-star for now, probably going to be a 4-star pretty soon. He's considered an ascending player. He's a converted basketball player who's rising up the rankings. So Miami might have gotten in early on the scouting with this one, which is great. And another player that this is an important visit, I think Miami needs to hit a home run here, is with Tyler Williams, 4-star wide receiver out of Sumner High School in Riverview, Florida. I keep hearing that this is someone Miami really likes. 6'2", 195 pounds. And the Hurricanes are considered to be the slight trending leader for him, for what that's worth, right? OV season just starting. But according to On3 Prediction Machine, Miami leads at 29%, and the Hurricanes right now are in front of Georgia, UCF, Syracuse, and Florida. It does appear that the Gators are trying to make a push there. I keep hearing about that. So another reason why you'd like to try to lock down Tyler Williams if Florida might be ascending. And ahead of his visit to Miami, Tyler Williams told Luke Cheney, my former colleague who's at 24/7 Sports now, he told him, I really like the coaching staff. I am a priority to them. So that is something that Kevin Beard and Cristobal. Did I just pick my nose here? I apologize for that. I felt like there was something in there, but that seems to be something that Mario Cristobal and Kevin Beard do a really good job of with these receivers, is making them feel like a priority. Another one I'm going to put on my list is 4-star edge rusher Hayden Lowe. It's a California kid. Jason Taylor seems to like this guy much in the way that he liked Marquise Lightfoot last season. Lowe, he's from Cali. USC is considered to be the trending favorite for him right now, followed by Texas, Miami, and then Oregon. So a lot of West Coast players there. 6'3", 227 pounds. My guy D Money at Canes Insight made a good point. He noted that Hayden Lowe, goes to the same high school as Mario Cristobal's signee, Kayvon Thibodeau. So the connections there are important. And a lot of times when you see, Cristobal heavily involved in the recruitment of West Coast guys, California guys, Oregon guys, right? Like, that's where Riley Williams, who obviously he went to IMG Academy, but he's originally from Oregon. When Cristobal is recruiting guys like this, it's because he has those connections with high schools over there from all the work that he did when he was the head coach at Oregon. So those recruiting connections and relationships are really important. I want to answer more of you guys' questions from the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. When we come back, someone asked me who would be the crown jewel of this recruiting class. Any sleepers on defense, players that are not talked about a whole lot, who I think can really step up this year. Oh, we got that for you. And you want to keep it locked. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I can't even tell you what it means to me that you guys, I know many of you in here are everydayers. If you're finding us for the first time, fantastic. We're here every single day on Locked On Canes. But the fact that so many of you make Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch every day, it really means a lot to me. I'm always humbled by the amount of support that we get on the show. And if you want to troll us and criticize, you can do that as well. But I'm always humbled by the amount of support that we get. And if you'd like to take that to the next level, you can join our Locked On Canes Insiders chat. I include a link down there in the show description. Click that link. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with recruiting scoops, show updates, breaking news, one-on-one questions and answers. We're going to be answering some questions from insiders here in a second. You can try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month after you opt in after 2 weeks. We give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. So, you remember we talked about this with the Truth Teller yesterday. One of our insiders had told us or asked us if Ruben Bain this year, Ruben Hurricane Bain, is going to break Miami's single season sack record. That record was set back in the 1980s, 17 sacks in a season by Danny Stubbs. That record has held up. I don't know what that might have been 86. Like that record has stood up for a very long time, nearly 40 years. That sack record has held up. Whether or not we thought Bain was going to break it, I just said, listen, I think Bain's going to hit double digits this year. I think he'll be over 10 sacks, but the fact that that is such a long-standing sack record and Bain is going to get some attention from opposing defenses as he deserves to, that's the type of guy you game plan against. I don't think a 40-year-old record is necessarily going to get broken this year, and he responded to that. He says, hey, thanks for using my question. I understand you and Bruce Warner, but Bain is legit the best pass rusher we've gotten in 20 years, maybe more, with Simeon and Clark in the middle. I don't think you guys understand he's going to get more chances. With his motor and technique, he will blossom. I can argue he was the number one reason for the Clemson win. You know what? I'm not going to argue with you on that. Now, imagine this year, he will have a few 2 to 3 sack games. I think Bain will leave and be high on the all-time sacks list. You know what? I'm hoping Miami can. I'm hoping if you talk about Bain having a handful of 2 to 3 sack games this year, I would love to see him get 3 sacks against Graham Mertz August 31st, right? If you can come away with that game against Florida's somewhat questionable offensive line and Miami's somewhat loaded defensive line, if Hurricane Bain can come away with a trio of sacks in that Florida game, I will change my tune. If he comes away with 3 sacks against UF, I'm going to come out of that saying, yeah, you know what? This might be the guy to break that Danny Stubbs single season sack record. And you know what? Whether Bain has 10 sacks or 30 sacks, I think he's going to have an awesome year. And I think Hurricane Bain, he's going to change the way that offensive coordinators game plan. We get a question from Joseph who says, Donno, which position groups do you think the Hurricanes will lead the conference in? I would say quarterback, defensive line, wide receiver, and running back. I think quarterback on paper, it looks obvious, right? I don't think anyone is going to be in the league that Cam Ward is in. He's put up more numbers than any other quarterback in the ACC has to this point. So I would tend to agree with you on Ward. As far as defensive line, I think Miami's in that conversation. I think Florida State's D-line is also going to be really good, although they lost Verse and Fisk, which does take away a lot of their production from last year. But I would say defensive line, Miami's going to be up there. I also have respect for Louisville's defensive line and Ashton Gelati. So I think Miami, Louisville, Florida State will be in that mix. Wide receiver, Miami does have the most proven talent there. They're the only team in the ACC that returns 3 receivers that had at least 500 yards receiving last year. In fact, Miami's got 3 receivers who had at least 800 receiving yards last year in the form of Xavier Restrepo, who's back, Jacoby George, who's back, and Sam Brown, who transferred over from Houston. So, the numbers would back up the receiver room and the running back room as well. I mean, according to Pro Football Focus, Miami's got 2 of the top 5 running backs in the ACC by numbers from last year. And no other team in the ACC has more than 1 of the top 5 running backs. So, you do the math. You could say that's going to be the best running back duo. And there's other players in addition to that. Chris Johnson, Jordan Lyle, who's getting rave reviews as a guy who's, just arrived within the last couple weeks for offseason workouts. A.J. Allen is back from last year. So, listen, I think quarterback, wide receiver, running back, there's a good bet. Defensive line would be a little tougher. You got some competition there. We get a question from Trey who says, who would you consider the crown jewel of this 2025 recruiting class? So just overall, like if you include guys Miami has not landed yet, hopefully being the operative word, if you can get DJ Pickett would be the crown jewel. One of the top players in the country, top 2, top 3 player in the country, top defensive player in the country. And it would be a great story, right? Not only having a guy like DJ Pickett to really revolutionize the future of your defensive secondary, but, the tie-in with his relatives, his uncle Booker Sr., his cousin Booker Jr., who's on the team now. That would be a great story. That would be the crown jewel. Now, if you're asking the crown jewel of guys Miami has like already landed verbal commits, Luke Nickel. I mean, quarterback. I think he could be the quarterback of the future. Continues to look really good along the combine circuit. He's an Elite 11 finalist. My guy JMP has been posting videos from Luke Nickel's spring game in Georgia, and he made some tremendous deep throws in that spring game. So that would be the guy who's already, I think, the crown jewel. But if you can land DJ Pickett would be the crown jewel. We get this question: do you have any sleepers on defense? Sleepers on defense who are not transfers, he says. Okay, so the ones that come to mind here, not transfers. Malik Bryant, I think, is someone I find myself even sleeping on. Malik Bryant, because when we talk about Miami's edge rusher rotation, obviously Ruben Bain gets mentioned. Akeem Mesidor coming off of injury. Elijah Alston, I get my Elijahs mixed up sometimes. Elijah Alston coming over with those great numbers out of Marshall, and Tyler Barron comes off great numbers at Tennessee, who Miami just landed. Those are the ones that get talked about. But I watched Malik Bryant for, a couple months during spring football. I thought he had a tremendous spring. This was someone Miami recruited as a linebacker, but was a pass rushing specialist in high school. Tremendous explosion in strength and instincts off the edge. And he had a really good spring. So I think Malik Bryant, who I hope we see on the field a lot, I would say that guy could be a sleeper. In terms of like young guys on defense, don't be surprised if Bobby Pruitt ends up getting on the field a little bit. Miami's linebacker rotation has gotten pretty deep since they added Jalen Alderman, but Pruitt had a really good spring, the true freshman out of Alabama. And, I don't know if you would call this guy a sleeper, because everyone in South Florida knows about him. Anyone who watches any high school football, this is a household name. But Zaquan Patterson, maybe not a sleeper, because nobody's sleeping on him. But I think that could be a guy who can, as a true freshman, step up on defense and do some exciting things this year. Well, I appreciate everyone for tuning in and making Locked On Canes your first listen, your first watch today. And yes, I will say hi to Michael. Hello to Michael, and hello to everyone who's been riding with us during the live chat on today's episode. You want to make sure to smash that thumbs up button, hit that like button, subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We are going to be back tomorrow. We'll talk more about that first OV weekend, because it's going to be here. Friday is coming up close, guys. We're hump day right now. Friday in a couple days, we're going to preview the first weekend of Miami official visits with Brian Smith, the recruiting overlord of the Locked On Network, and my colleague at allhurricanes.com. He is going to join us tomorrow. We'll be back at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday for another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.